So we've already learned about the process of photosynthesis, whereby plants and other organisms with chloroplasts can convert solar energy into the chemical energy of sugar. They're using water molecules and carbon dioxide molecules to make glucose, and in the process oxygen is released. In this lesson we'll review the role of light in that process and then do a final comparison between plant cells and animal cells. So here we see a picture of one of the chloroplasts, and it is shown to be interacting with light. And we know that white light has all the colors of the spectrum, but the chlorophyll molecules on the surface of the chloroplast, they interact with different colors of light in different ways. In the picture here we see the blue light and the red light being absorbed by chlorophyll molecules, and the green light is being reflected. And that's significant because only the absorbed light is available as energy to power the chemical processes of photosynthesis. In the graph over here, we actually see two graphs here. The top graph is the absorption spectrum for chlorophyll molecules, both chlorophyll A and B, and they also have another pigment molecule here. We'll disregard that. But the y-axis is percent absorption, so what percentage of light of a certain color is absorbed by chlorophyll, like shown in this picture here. And we can see down here is going to be the between 400 and 500. This is going to be the blues, and then the greens between 5 and 600 nanometers, and the reds over here. We can see that there are peaks in the blue range. As well, there are peaks in the red range. And that's indicating that chlorophyll molecules tend to absorb the red and the blue colors. Notice very low absorption in the green, for the green color. And so the green is going to be reflected. Now, if you look at the bottom graph, we see a graph of just measuring photosynthesis rate. And that rate in experiments with aquatic plants is just measuring the production of oxygen. Oxygen is a waste product of photosynthesis, but it's correlated to photosynthesis rate. So here we see, again, we have a peak in the blue range, a valley in the green, and a peak in the red. And that's no accident. It's because the reds and the blues are being absorbed that energy then is available to power photosynthesis. So, in a sense, the top graph here explains the bottom graph. Why do plants grow best with the blue light or the red light? Because those colors can be absorbed by chlorophyll, and that energy is made available to power the chemistry of photosynthesis. And from this point of view, then, the worst color of light to shine on a plant, if you want the plant to grow, would be green light, because it cannot absorb that energy, and so it will have no energy to power photosynthesis. Now in this diagram here we see the chloroplast again, and real chloroplasts in plant cells. And down here is an apparatus that's often used to measure photosynthesis. So you have a light source and you have an aquatic plant, and you can measure then oxygen production. And again, oxygen is correlated to glucose production. They're both produced in the process of photosynthesis. So the more oxygen produced, the more photosynthesis. Now in this slide, though, I wanted to review what the plant is initially doing with the absorbed light energy. What the plant is doing is splitting water molecules with that light energy. Now water, H2O, right, one atom of oxygen, two atoms of hydrogen, and here we see two molecules of water. And when that light energy is absorbed, water molecules will be broken apart. Oxygen atoms chemically combined to form a molecule of oxygen, and this is the oxygen then that's liberated during the process of photosynthesis. The hydrogens ultimately, here we see these hydrogen atoms uniting to form hydrogen gas, molecular hydrogen, but in photosynthesis these hydrogens are ultimately going to be used to build glucose. We simulated this process of using energy to split water using a battery. This is called electrolysis. And we noticed that in one of the collecting tubes we had a volume of hydrogen gas, in the other a volume of oxygen, although we didn't see much of the oxygen due to some chemistry in the water. We are using battery power to do what plants do with light. So the initial collection of light then is used to split water molecules. The oxygen is released as a waste product, and the hydrogens will eventually go to build glucose. Now here we see our old diagram of the plant absorbing water from the roots. The water will be delivered up into the leaves. Carbon dioxide enters through stomata, and so we have the two building materials here. We have the absorption of light to power the chemistry to build glucose, and oxygen is released. This whole process of photosynthesis means that plants and other organisms with chloroplasts can make their own food, which is glucose, right? Now that puts plants then, if you think about a food chain or the food pyramid here, it puts plants at the base of most food chains. They are what they're called primary producers. They are producing food, right? So they are going to be food for lots of other organisms in the ecosystem. And so we have animals here that eat plants directly, and then there are other animals that eat those animals, and then there are top predators and so on. And so photosynthesis is critically important to ecosystems because it is the bottom, the base of most food chains in any particular ecosystem. Why is that? Well, because light is a plentiful energy source, and it is in most environments there are ready supplies of water and carbon dioxide. So plants and other organisms with chloroplasts have evolved the capacity to make use of those readily available materials and an energy source to build the critically important molecule glucose. Now, if we take a look at an animal, so from the animal's point of view, of course, the animal needs to have food, so the ingestion here of food here, well, that food ultimately is going to depend on plants. The animal might eat plants directly or animals that eat the plants. And in the respiration department, right, so the animal is going to be breathing here. It'll be exchanging gases. It'll be absorbing oxygen, and plants, again, are producing oxygen during photosynthesis. And then the glucose from photosynthesis will be ingested, and then the animal cells are going to burn the glucose, produce carbon dioxide waste. That carbon dioxide waste will be exhaled. Of course, undigested food will be eliminated as waste as well. And, of course, animals may be subject to predation, so they might become food for other animals in a food chain. But again, animals are critically dependent upon plants for both the glucose in their diets and the oxygen in the air. Finally, we can understand the relationship between plants and animals in terms of the cells out of which they're made. So here we have a plant cell on the left and an animal cell on the right. Just a couple of things to note about these cells. Animal cells have a membrane. All cells have a membrane. These animal cells also have a nuclear membrane inside of which are chromosomes made of DNA and protein. In addition, animal cells have mitochondria, and we'll come to them in a moment. The plant cells also have a membrane. It's this inner boundary here, but they also have a cell wall, a more rigid outer structure made of cellulose, which are sugar molecules linked together. Like animal cells, then they have a membrane. They have a nuclear membrane. They have chromosomes in the nucleus. Plant cells have mitochondria as well. But critically, plant cells have the chloroplasts, those green structures. And it's the chloroplasts down here in this part of the diagram that we can see are the ones that are going to convert light energy into chemical energy in the form of glucose. So there's a whole bunch of complex chemistry going on, carried out by proteins, the workers of the cell. And they're going to be synthesizing glucose. Oxygen will be released as a waste product. But of course, those two molecules are very important for animals. And the structure inside the plant cell that is often associated with these two is the mitochondria. Now, biologists call the complex set of chemical reactions here cellular respiration. Now, respiration, sometimes we think of breathing. Well, inside the mitochondria, there are chemical reactions that are also called respiration. So that's not quite the same thing, but notice the process will require oxygen. So the chemistry going on in the mitochondria is a chemistry in which oxygen is used, and ultimately the cell is going to be extracting energy from, in a sense, burning glucose. Well, when you burn glucose, you produce water and carbon dioxide, the very starting materials for photosynthesis. So in a sense, then, plants and animals are engaged in this cycle. What the chloroplasts are producing are the starting materials for the mitochondria. What the mitochondria end up producing as waste are the starting materials for photosynthesis. So plants are producing the starting materials for the animals are releasing as waste the starting materials for the plants. And so here we can just think about a quick study tip. If you can just remember what one of these structures, either the chloroplast or the mitochondria, if you can remember what one of them does, the other is kind of doing the reverse process. So chloroplasts are making glucose and releasing oxygen, starting with water and carbon dioxide. So starting materials here, ending products here, whereas mitochondria are doing the reverse. They're starting with the glucose and oxygen and ending by producing water and carbon dioxide molecules. In addition, if we look closely up here in the plant cell, because plant cells have both mitochondria and chloroplasts, in a sense that cycle is happening within the plant cell itself. Notice in an animal cell, since there are no chloroplasts, that cycle can't happen. Animals made of animal cells have to get their sugar by consuming living things in the environment, right? And so that makes them dependent ultimately on the plants, because the plants are making sugar and then they're burning the sugar that they just made. They make the sugar in the chloroplasts and they burn the sugar in the mitochondria.